children of narcissists, and one is about the difficult employee, which could also be your boss, the difficult person in the organization. So I'll start with children, because most children are young. So I'll start with children, and I will discuss children in how children interact with, or more precisely, how narcissists manipulate children. And so counter manipulation is much more easily discernible once we go through the manipulative techniques of the narcissist himself. I'm saying narcissist himself. There's a growing debate whether most narcissists are men or whether a growing percentage of narcissists are women, etc., etc. There are pros and cons. It still seems that the majority of narcissists are men. That would be my verdict at this stage. I think it's somewhere between 60 and 75% still. Narcissism, mind you, is a culture-bound thing. It's attached to values such as ambition, competitiveness, and so on. So it's kind of a testosterone-laden diagnosis. And that's why, of course, close to 70, 75, depending on the country, % of people with borderline personality disorder are women. And 90% of people diagnosed with histrionic personality disorder are women. That doesn't bode well, because it means that these diagnoses are gender biased. They represent or reflect social mores, social conventions, gender roles. They are not clinical entities in the strictest, purest sense. Tuberculosis, for instance, doesn't know the difference between men and women. So it's a clinical entity. It's clear. Not so narcissistic personality or borderline personality or so. This is an aside. How do narcissists manipulate their children? There are 5 ways. The first, I don't think it's a good idea to drink. Mother told me that. That's why I hated her. So, here we go. There are 5 ways that narcissists use, 5 manipulative techniques that narcissists use on their children on a regular basis. The first one is guilt-driven, the guilt-driven technique. You know the story. I've sacrificed my life for you. I gave up everything for you. I gave up my career. I could have been this actress, that. This is usually indicative of a narcissistic parent. It's a parent whose grandiosity is frustrated by the birth of the child, or owing to the birth of the child. And then she or he raised the child and use guilt-tripping to manipulate the child, to determine behavior, and so on and so forth. So all these techniques should be mirrored. All these techniques should be mirrored. So if the narcissistic parent tells you, or the child tells the child, you know, I sacrificed my life for you, you owe me, etc., etc., the counter technique is, of course, well, you ruined my life, you, etc. So guilt trip the narcissistic parent. That usually has an immediate effect. The narcissistic parent will shut up permanently if you do it well enough. The second technique is codependent. Technique is a codependent manipulative technique. I can't cope without you. You know how dependent I am on you, etc., etc. So these kind of parents would invent myriad ways to necessitate the presence of the child. So, you know, I'm physically disabled, I can't move, or I'm very weak, I need you here, or I have a high pulse, please call the ambulance, or whatever. They would find a variety of ways to ensure that the child is present. And these are usually parents who are clingy, needy, so they would be borderline. They would have borderline personality disorder or codependency issues, as opposed to the first type of parent, which is usually narcissistic. The grandiosity of the first type of parent is frustrated, and technically these parents are what we call collapsed narcissists. They are narcissists whose life's ambitions have been frustrated, and they use the child as a vessel, conduit, and instrument to realize their unfulfilled fantasies, dreams, and wishes, which is a way of objectifying the child, of course. Is you following on this? I mean, am I too fast? As an aside, methodological aside, because I work in academia now and I'm very proud of it, and I want to show you that I'm a professor. So as a methodological aside, one should not confuse the terms failed narcissist with collapsed narcissist, as many wannabe experts do online. Failed narcissist is a stage in the development of borderline personality disorder. The person who becomes ultimately, who acquires ultimately borderline personality disorder, first tries to be a narcissist. Then she fails. And having failed, she develops borderline personality disorder. So this is the failed phase of borderline personality disorder psychogenesis. You want to be narcissists who have not attained their goals, who have disappointed themselves, narcissists with a big grandiosity gap between their self-image and reality. When you talk about this kind of narcissists, these are collapsed narcissists. Okay? So these parents are collapsed. And they use the child to restore their grandiosity. They use the child to regulate their sense of grandiosity. And this is what we call second source of supply. The child becomes a secondary source of supply. We'll come to it a bit later. The third way, with the codependent narcissistic parent, of course, what did I say? Mirror. I need you. No, I need you. You know, come here, I need you, this, that. You come there and say, well, actually, can you do this for me? Can you give me this? I need you for this. Come here for a minute. I mean, generate neediness and clinginess of your own. Once you mirror the manipulative technique of the narcissistic parent will cease and desist. Guaranteed. Money back. So this is codependency. The third type of narcissistic parent is goal-driven. It's a goal-driven narcissistic parent, and usually would be psychopathic. And that's the kind of narcissistic parent who would tell the child, we have a common goal. We have a common goal. We call this, with this strategy, co-optation. Co-opt the child. So we tell the child, there's a very famous movie, I think it's called Shine, about a father who made up his mind that his son would be the greatest pianist or violinist, I don't know, pianist, I think. And of course, the child ended up mentally insane, in an insane asylum. But the parent was using the child to realize but was presenting it to the child as a common goal. He wouldn't say, listen, I dreamt of being a pianist, now it's your turn. He would say, no, this is our goal, for you to be the greatest pianist. And he used to travel with him everywhere. Even when the so-called kid became like 40 years old, 37 years old, he would never let him go. He would like live with him in the same hotel rooms, and they merged. We call this process merger or fusion. This is the technical term. So they fused, they merged, they became one organism with two psyches. And this is the common goal. Now, usually such a parent would have severe or emphasized psychopathic tendencies. Psychopathy is not necessarily antisocial. Many psychopaths are pro-social. It's another common mistake in the literature, where people confuse psychopaths and sociopaths. Sociopath is not a mental health diagnosis. It's a label. It simply means someone who abhors society, hates laws, is defiant, and hates authority. Me. So this is a sociopath. A psychopath is a mental health diagnosis, the oldest, by the way. It's the oldest mental health diagnosis after depression. Depression was first described in the 17th century. Psychopathy was first described at the end of the 18th century. The oldest by far. So psychopathy, antisocial personality disorder, it's very misleading, the label, antisocial. That's actually Robert Hare's and Babiak's criticism of the label. It's not antisocial. Many psychopaths are pro-social. For example, 3.6% of all chief executive officers of Fortune 500 are psychopaths, diagnosed psychopaths. Bless you, after me. First, bless me. Okay. So this is a kind of psychopathic parent. We have a common goal. Of course, mirror technique, because now we have how to manipulate a narcissist psychopath would be your parent. Yeah? So the anti-technique is to establish an alternative common goal, or to distinguish within the common goal, my goal, your goal, to break the common goal. So, but much more powerful is to establish an alternative common goal that looks as though it is meant to further the parent's common goal, but actually undermines it. It's a subversive technique. Okay? So I don't know. our common goal is for you to be a big pianist, okay, but I need these and these lessons and they cost like $1 million. It looks like part of the common goal, but actually it subverts the common goal, destroys it. The next type of parent is this explicit manipulation, punitive parent. It's the kind of parent who tells you, if you don't obey me, if you don't listen to me, etc., I'm going to disinherit you. Or if you don't live by my rules, leave this home. I mean, go away. It's the kind of parent who posits a demand, requires, so makes. So with this kind of parent, the possible technique is to obey or to preempt, simply preempt. If you don't obey me, I'll throw you out of home. Leave home. Very simple. Then he loses his weapon. The parent loses his weapon. And usually he will try to get you back. So he will become much softer. He'll say, like, if you don't obey, leave home. I left home. Bye-bye. Then we'll call you, no, come back, this, I miss you, this, that. I mean, these are the techniques these are the counter techniques. Last kind of parent is a parent who uses shared psychosis. We all know this kind of parent. It's we against the world. It's the two of us against the world. You know? The world is hostile, dangerous, this and this. You and I are fighting the world. It's us against the world. Another type of shared psychosis is emotional incest, sometimes also physical incest, but much more common is emotional incest, where, for example, a parent would tell a child, you are my loved one, or you're my love, you're the love of my life, etc., with explicit adult overtones. In the shared psychosis could be directed at the world, but much more often it's directed at the person the two know, the parent and the child. For example, it's you and me against your horrible father. Your father is a monster, he's torturing me, but it's you and me. You're supporting me against you. So this is parentifying the child, forcing the child to be parental, parentifying the child. And of course, the unfortunate strategy in this case is to create coalitions. So if it's me and you, stop at this stage, yeah, and you can all ask questions about this segment, about this part.
Is it possible to have more than one type?
Mike, you need to be recorded for posterity, but
it's not working.
It is working, but I think, does anyone else have a question? Because you've already asked a question.
Okay.
Democracy in action.
Yeah. Does anyone else? If no one else has a question, I'll give you the mic. But we must, divide the load.
Socialism in action, comrades.
Comrades,
Right.
it's this or the gulag? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Har Georgela, CBT therapist. What is the benefit, or is there any benefit?
You would really, really seriously have to raise your voice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there any benefit or mileage in teaching the children these techniques, or is that not simply not ethical to deal with the narcissist?
Of who teaching these techniques?
The techniques to the children so that they can defend themselves effectively.
How ethical it is to teach children these techniques?
Yeah.
Well, beyond a certain age, I think it's not ethical, it's obligatory.
Yeah.
There is a question of parental alienation. There are delicate issues because parents are very important figures in personal growth, personal development. Parents become introjects. The voices of parents are internalized, and then they create psychological dynamics on a permanent basis for life. So it's very important not to taint the introject, not to create an image of the parent that would affect the introject, so that later affect your life, etc., etc. So up to a certain age, I would say I would definitely not teach these techniques, nor would I disparage the other parent. Nor would I say, no, your father is a narcissist, and so on and so forth. I would teach the child to put boundaries. So if your father tries to touch you when you're naked in the shower, don't allow it. I would teach the child boundaries. But I would not present it as a defense against the other parent, but like this is what people do. This is how to behave. I would teach the child rudimentary coping mechanisms. So if you see that your father is angry, don't criticize him, don't disagree with him. I would teach some basics. But these techniques, I think the cutoff age should be around 13. So around the age of 13, we are transitioning to prepubescence, and during prepubescence, we are beginning to create inner constructs which remain with us for life. And these inner constructs are extremely heavily influenced by these manipulative techniques. So for example, if a prepubescent child is guilt-tripped constantly, she will remain with guilt for the rest of her life. She will always ask herself, what did I do wrong? How am I responsible? I fucked this up, etc., etc. So after the age of 13, when we begin to create the landscape of inner constructs, I think it's critical to raise awareness of the type of parent that the child is facing, and also teaches techniques. But even in this case, not with any values attached. Not to say this is bad, this is good, he is evil. You are not to make it a morality play, not to convert it into a religion. Let's say this is who he is, and this is how he should behave. I mean, this is to make it sound like as a matter of fact, not something mythologized or hysterical or Manichaean, something. Because we have this tendency. If you go online, you will see videos and so on. Narcissists are demons. We are fighting. It's good versus evil. We mythologize the whole thing. Narcissism is not a piece of myth. It's simply, frankly, an asshole. So, how to cope with assholes. It's 101. Now, you wouldn't mythologize an asshole. For example, you wouldn't say, this asshole is demonic. Demonic asshole. Can't even think of it. Sounds a bit excessive even for me. So you understand what I'm saying? I mean, if you take it down, if you reduce it down to size, if you look at the reality, not the metaphor or the text or the text or the supertext or what the deconstructivists call, the real text. I mean, if you ignore all this mess, what is a narcissist? It's a bloody asshole. So you need to learn how to cope with him. It's extremely simple. Everything should be communicated to the child as though, this is how you should cross the street, this is how you light fire, and this is how you should deal with your father. Totally matter of fact and within context. Yes, please.
When you're talking to make your lips need to be almost touching it. Yeah, right on it. Cheers. Yeah, stick the lipstick on it. I'm right with that.
Talking about children, I'm quite concerned, and it was really good that you started to talk about children, but do you not think that if you are unaware that your partner is a narcissist, your children are growing up in this false sort of atmosphere or fantasy atmosphere, do you not think that, personally I'm worried that my children have grown up with this sort of false atmosphere with their narcissistic father and a codependent mother. Do they then go on to repeat it in their lives? Do you think they go on to, because they think that's reality, they think that's how people operate? How do they ever get out of it?
Yeah, well, starting in 1996, there were studies by Roningstam and others that have demonstrated pretty conclusively that the incidence and prevalence of narcissistic disorders, because narcissistic personality of disorders, not a spectrum of narcissism only, because we have healthy narcissism, all of you have it. But then there are disorders to varying degrees, and then we have narcissistic personalities, which is like the post-apocalypse, the zombie apocalypse. So, but within the normal spectrum of narcissistic disorders, Roningstam and others, many others, Masterson, others, demonstrated that the incidence and prevalence of narcissistic disorders among children of narcissists, or children of parents who were diagnosed more precisely with the dramatic cluster, cluster B, personality disorder, the incidence and prevalence are much higher, considerably much higher. Reality testing was actually not the major problem. The major problem was interpersonal relatedness, how these children interact with other people. Meaningful others, like love interests or intimate partners, non-meaningful others. For example, they had severe difficulties at work, coping at work. These were studies conducted by Maccoby as late as 2003. So these children have severe difficulties at work. They can't obey orders, they're grandiose, they sabotage the workplace, etc., etc. So yes, growing up with a narcissistic parent, if the other parent does not provide a counter example, and if the other parent does not enable the narcissistic parent, I mean, if the other parent provides a counter example, you have a narcissistic parent and a non-narcissistic parent, actually, we did not discover any effect on children. Or these children grow normal, I mean, totally healthy. But parent, or a narcissistic parent with an enabler, codependent, or not only codependent, by the way, narcissists are enabled by a variety of, then the incidence and prevalence are much higher. But not to be alarmed, much higher means like 5 times higher than the normal population, the rate of the normal population, so it would be about anywhere between 5 and 7%. So we're not talking about, the influenza. However, yes, these children suffer. Again, it's not reality test that suffers, but usually interpersonal relationships and goal setting in life. The goals are unrealistic, they are inflated, they're grandiose. So, for example, the incidence and prevalence of depressive disorders among these children, and anxiety disorders, mood disorders, among these children is much higher, and so on. It is the role of the other non-narcissistic parent to balance the narcissistic parent. Some non-narcissistic parents have an alibi. I didn't know he was a narcissist. Yes, but you knew he was a... Yes, true. You didn't have the label. By the way, no one had the label. When I started my work in 95, the last studies of narcissism were in 1974. They were conducted by some obscure figure called Kohut. And narcissism was nowhere. So these parents, they were parents in 1960-something. I'm proof of that. So they were parents. And still, you knew when your husband was out of line, crazy, unpleasant to people. I mean, you knew that. The label is meaningless. You knew that you had to balance. If he was discourteous, if he was aggressive, if he was to others, you knew that you had to make up for it somehow. You have to apologize, you have to be nice. So it should have come instinctually. So the parents who claim, I didn't know that he was a narcissist, is utter rubbish. It's an alibi. The parents who claim to be codependent, so they are incapable constitutionally of opposing the narcissist because of their own emotional neediness or emotional dysregulation or whatever, that's an entirely different story. That's an entirely different story. And then the children are unlucky. This is a lottery of life. That's a lottery of life. Some children get mentally disordered parents. Some children get my parents. Not to talk about this. And so forth. That's a lottery of life. Mike coming.
If we
The mic.
more question, and then I'll take over.
One more question, we can.
I have come to these seminars 4 times,
My condolences.
and my son and my daughter, without coming to these seminars, taught me a great lesson. They told me my narcissistic husband is covert and on the run in the hype. We don't know where he is, where he lives, with who, what he does.
Good for you.
He sends money and he calls once in a while. I'm happy that he's not in my life anymore. Thanks to your seminars, I went from crying and praying God and doing yoga to hiring a private eye, which ended up being more useful. My son and my daughter told me, they're 20 and 22, so not children. Mom, you have to stop telling us that you wish we had a better father. This is the father we've got. We know what his limits are, and we can live with that. However, I'm concerned that they have lived 20 years with a ghost father that's somewhere else, okay? My real concern is money. That's my objective for the
No kidding.
for the manipulation. Okay,
Donald Trump.
okay, I um I have a clear objective. It doesn't come out of rage or revenge or fear or loneliness. I mean, I feel bad for him. Um, However, I don't have any power leverage in this relationship. He has all the money. He has a lot of money, and I can't complain. I had to take my ego and emotions out because I said to myself, okay, he gives me a lot of money, but he has much more, and I would like to have more. Okay, but he is not wise, and he could fall prey to somebody on the phone that proposes investment, and then me and my daughter and son would be in big shit. The question is, how can I? I don't know how to put it, but it's not a question. It's there's not much that I can do. There's no much room for manipulation. I mean, he's. I don't know where he is.
It's difficult.
I don't know what he's doing with this money. I don't want to make him mad, so I play it, cool. Um, I don't feel fear, but sometimes I'm like, what if he calls me one day and tells me there's no more money? I mean, there's no question. There's.
It's much more important. I bless you. So maybe because there was no question, maybe we should allow one more
Yeah.
question.
I'll be really quick.
By the way, just a split second. Children with an absent parent, whether narcissistic or not, but especially narcissistic, develop other types of problems. They are known as object permanence problems. They are problems that when the parent is absent, the child has severe difficulty to regard other people as safe, as they will be in his life or her life. So they develop something that Jean Piaget called object permanence issues. And it's very difficult for them to create intimacy or to invest emotionally, a process called cathexis, to invest emotionally in another person, because they simply don't believe that person will be there. Fly by night, he's here today, there tomorrow, exactly like father. So just as an aside, yes.
It was just going back to the question before this lady, and you were saying children that have come from a narcissistic and a codependent couple. And my children are grown now, but I'm obviously seeing the results of that.
You have grown children?
I do.
Oh my God.
So obviously they've been dealt the hand they've been dealt. Is there any way you can now doing all this, realising, listening to you guys and realising what has gone on and what it is all about, is there any way to make it better?
Spartan life coach.
Right. Or to help them, as young adults, sort of take a different path.
Yeah. These children would tend to have a cluster of problems that is usually typical either of codependence or more on the narcissistic spectrum. If their problems are more of the narcissistic type, then I'm afraid there's nothing much you can do for them, because we are running out of time. If the problems are on the codependent spectrum, then yes, there are very effective techniques, therapies, techniques, coping mechanisms, and so on. Richard, by the way, developed a whole literature about the subject. So then there's hope. But if what they had adopted from the father or the mother, whatever, the narcissistic parent, if what they had adopted is a narcissistic mode of relating to others, relating to the world, judging reality, setting goals, etc., then we are faced with narcissism. Maybe not narcissistic personality disorder, but narcissism. And narcissism is notoriously impossible to treat. It's notoriously impossible to treat because narcissism is not an add-on or a plug-in to the personality. It is the personality. So it's like personality transplant, brain transplant. It's very difficult to do. I've developed a therapy, cold therapy, but that's for really severely extreme narcissists. Not for middle of the way narcissists. Middle of the way narcissists somehow fall between the brackets. There's no effective treatment modality. All treatment modalities that exist today can only modify behavior, usually temporarily, but can only modify abrasive, antisocial behavior, counterproductive behavior to some extent. But that's more or less it.
Sound. All right. Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to take over about half an hour. Domo arigato.
After that, I have a segment about workplace, and so we'll...
Yes, okay, yeah. We'll tag team them until they pass out. That question you're asking, a yes or no answer from you. Do you have any hook into him whatsoever? Yes or no? Okay. It's going to be really, really hard to manipulate anybody under any circumstances unless you have some threat or some reward that could be offered. It just can't be done, and especially if the contact is very, very low as well. This looks less clear than before. Terence, no, sorry, Steve, could you?
It's my aura.
It's your. You've absorbed it all. Could you the blinds, please, mate? Yeah, thank you. Yes. We've lost the arrows. Oh yeah. No, you just you put it on play like this, boom, and then you get your arrows back. Pow. So we just need to go. I think we're 4 slides in. Thank you, mate. Can you guys sort of see that? It's readable, legible. Good. Yes. Just right there. If you leave it there, that's perfect. Yeah, that's it. There was something that Sam said there that I wanted to follow on from the point of view of self-identified codependence. Now, I had a thought, and it was quite a clever one, so give me a second, because this is not easy for me. We want to mythologize them, and mythologizing them is also pathologizing them. We want the rubber stamp of psychiatry. We want some narrative to go around it. We don't want to say they're just an arsehole. We don't like that. I'm not 100% sure why, but I suspect it might be because of the upbringing. Thou shalt honor thy father and mother. So because for most of us where the codependency was stamped in was usually primary object, mother, father, it's a massive taboo for us that we're holding in the core software to point to the problem and just go, you're the fucking problem, not me. You, not me. So then we're in an internal fight. We go, I know the problem is coming from there, but no, I can't quite do it. So we end up putting like a layer, a blurred layer around this. There's some story. There was psychiatric, intricate borderline with a bit of histrionic, and then there was also some autism. It's where really it is probably healthier to be able to just say, no, the person's just a bit of a dickhead. Terry and Steve, when they're coaching people, this is where we start from, especially if they're stuck, either trying to come out of an abusive relationship or they're in one, is to downgrade the status of the psychopath or the narcissist to just con artist, arsehole. Bring them down to an everyday level. Not that you shouldn't understand the literature. It's good. It will help you to understand things. But helping you to understand things rationally can only go so far. And we know that because you're here. And I know that most of you, those of you who aren't, have spent many a long hour studying the subject. And your understanding cerebrally is probably quite high, but the emotional processing is probably quite low. So there's only so far we can go. One more book isn't going to do it. If I may, one more seminar isn't going to do it. One more Spartan Life Coach course isn't going to do it. So I would go, thanks very much for coming. This thing that you've given me, the responsibility for it, or that you would offer to Sam or any authority figure, I need to put back onto you, even though you don't want it. I'm going to try and find a way of making you accept this thing that you don't. That's my manipulation to you. I told you I would tell you if I'm manipulating you. This thing is like a pitch, a boiler room pitch, saying, take this back. Your brain's telling you, no, you deal with it. You deal with it. And I'm saying, take it back. That you don't need anybody else. You don't need a higher authority. You can just say to yourself, okay, here's the crux if we're talking about people here because of abusive relationships particularly. Is this person treating you badly? Yes. Does being with them make you feel bad? Yes. You have my permission to walk away. It doesn't matter what the label is, whether they'd win it, you would, it feels bad. They're being a dick. They're not respecting your boundaries. It doesn't feel good. Walk away. Your programming from childhood, the colonized part of your brain, the slave conditioning says, no, you shall honor thy father and mother. You must not say this person is bad. You're not allowed to. I know that conditioning is there, but that's where the issue is. It's internal. So our locus of control on solving the issue must also be internal, not external. You're looking at me like, I kind of understand what he's saying, but you'll get the playback of this, and then you'll read it back and you go, that was word salad. The guy just spoke words and it meant nothing. You are with me, right? Kind of, yeah. So this is another manifestation of the fetishist split, which have compassion for yourself. It's not because you're mad or you love drama or you're addicted or blah, 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 blah. None of that. It's none of that. It's probably that, as I'm looking around at you, you were raised in environments where people screamed at you until your adrenaline went through the fucking roof, which is not natural and we're not evolved for, and then something broke. You went, I can't cope with this, so I now need a survival mechanism to cope with this. Sam's raised in an extremely traumatic environment. The survival response was, the child just goes, fucking hell. Adult rage, like adult sexual attention or adult anything that's being pushed into the child's space causes massive, massive trauma. So this is more of we've come here because we think we're in a battle with somebody else. My pitch to you is actually it's more about a battle with us. More about a battle that perhaps was already fought years ago, and we need to go back and reclaim that space. That's more important than finding the technique, the push button thing that's going to make them. It's inside us. That person doesn't have the power that you think you do. I'll take your question, and what I'll do, we won't bother with the mic, I'll just say it back. Keep it brief though, because I need to remember it. I'm not that bright, genius scouter. No one is. None of us are that bright. So I take that back. The arsehole only thing. I don't have that policy. Jesus, don't tell anyone. Go on. This is going to be hard for me to say back, right? Could you hand this? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. There is a religious sect called the Bogomils, and because they believe that bringing children into the world trap light in the universe, they were strictly arsehole only. Yes, please take the mic. Talk right into the mic. Straight face. Much better.
So what broke my world view and why I sort of put these people in a different category, or at least I kind of don't class people that are just a bit emotionally fucked up and manipulative as that, but because with the person that I knew, like what I worked out in the end was his sole purpose was just to destroy me as a person. There wasn't another goal. So like when most people that I know that are arseholes, and I've been around quite a few, they want something, whether it's control, whether it's...
He just wanted pure destruction.
Pure, that's all he wanted.
He just wanted to wipe you off the face of the map.
Yeah, and it took...
So he's a mega asshole.
Yeah,
or a super
but like,
asshole.
It's just so would you, because I...
What I didn't say there, and this is Go on. Finish your question, and then we'll need to.
Is that narcissistic personality disorder? Because I was like, is this something different from like, I don't know.
It's a beautifully naive question. I love it. Really, you have come here with this expectation. I will give it to you. Please hand the mic back. Are we aware? So yeah, that is it's a naive question, because so I give it back to you. What would it help you for me to say on the basis of like 25 seconds of words that you gave me? Yes, that's narcissistic personality disorder. Does it feel good? Is it like, yes? What are you looking? It's tough, right? Like, you're in that space right now. I've lived in that space of for years, and I'm like, this can't be. What's not? The cogs stop. So your brain is still going, what's the word that describes who he is that then permits me to if you like, if you want to live in that fantasy world. Yeah, and bearing in mind that an interaction with a truly criminally inclined personality type, which is, you know, I've read some of the literature, I've read some of the research, and I'm looking at psychopaths, and obviously I have lived I grew up with somebody like this. I tend to say criminally inclined. Criminally inclined. What is it? But that means something to me. Will they transgress legal boundaries? Do they think that the normal laws of man and woman don't apply to them? Is there a moral length that they will not stoop to fulfill an agenda with an objective on it? Will you perpetually be saying to yourself, my God, I didn't think any human being was capable of going that low? So if you were asking these questions, then in terms of the literary exercise, which is all it is, there's just human beings looking at other human beings. And just because they have PhDs and everything, they can't do anything else but use their consciousness and go, we think this cluster of behaviors is clinically usefully described as psychopathy. But it's not agreed. It's not like from Moses set in stone. It's the argument's still ongoing. They're looking for different ways of describing it. And then we put it in a bucket. We go, yes, we caught the fish in a bucket. This is what it is. And then pops back out again and you go, except there, except there, except there, except there. So criminally inclined asshole, maybe. And then you'd like afterward, most clinicians probably would describe that kind of thing based on what I've seen as psychopathy or antisocial personality disorder. But what was the point of this interaction? For you as a human being, I'll tell you, I answered the questions just so I could talk more, not to. So this is what we do a lot of in the coaching, is your head. The three of us are not academics either, like, so we reduce it like this. Your head is pointing over there. Now, why is your head pointing over there? Because that's where the trauma and the pain is. So I can keep you focused on me if I give you massive amounts of pain and shock, because the central nervous system is going to go, dude, pay attention. The shitstorm. My God, what just happened? There it is. Look. And even after the relationship has ended, you're walking away and you're going like this, aren't you? And that's what you're asking me is, how do we get my head from over there back over here? And the job would then be to actually sort of, the coaching process is like, move this way, because that's done. There's different processes we go through, but if your unconscious is sending you a message, I'm not safe, the obsession will continue, because we're survival machines. We're incredibly, in some ways, you know, intricate and complicated and beautiful, but the basic principles on which we operate that we need to bear in mind for getting on with our lives, because I don't want this trauma measured in decades for you, which it could be. That's tragedy. A couple of years is a pain in the arse. We can deal with that. So you can have it fixed, and you should be thinking in terms of years, is to actually say, look, it happened. Can we have permission from the unconscious to start looking at the next, this was a relationship, right? Yeah, the next man, the next scenario, life moving forward that isn't defined by them, because he's corrupted your whole worldview at this point, where you're just like, this is the puzzle. He is the puzzle that must be solved. If we, then I'll get into this in a later section, when you realize how insignificant he is, you'll feel free, but you'll also be sad. And I've taken some of you in this room through this process where you feel free, right? 3 months ago, this lady came in tears, very, very upset. We did a few literary exercises where you write lists. It sounds ridiculous, but you write them a few times a day. You do it for a month, 6 weeks, and it goes. And you become free. That feels good. I'll tell you what feels bad. You feel like a complete plonker. Because you'll see, this guy, it's the Wizard of Oz. Me and Sam were talking about the Wizard of Oz yesterday. There's nothing behind the curtain but a little entity pulling levers and smoke screens, and it's a con. It's a con writ large. But because he's done it to you and he's made himself huge in your reality, you're like, he's not just some asshole. Sam and Richard, you're wrong. He's not just some asshole. Like, he's like the mega demon. The Urotsuki Doji. There's a bit of Japanese, I know. It's like the overfiend. You know, he's not. He's a damaged fella. He's frightened. He's mean. He's learned bullying tactics. And the reason why he got to you, like I couldn't do to you what he did to you. But before you knew who he was, you fell in love, right? So love was the leverage. Love was his manipulation against you. That was the ultimate leverage. Sexual love. So sex and love and intimacy. My God, is there anything more addictive to the human entity than this? To be seen, to be heard, to be felt by one person. All the poetry, the love songs, the films are all about that. Ultimately, that's what we're looking for. So don't feel bad. None of you feel bad. I mean, he dangled in front of you something that's better than money, better than anything. It's like winning the lottery times 10. It's like, this is safety, this is happiness, this is everything I want, all encompassing. And then you said, fucking hell, I'll sign up for a bit of that. And then when it was too late, you realized you'd signed up for something else. It's a bait and switch. Come here, you'll receive love. No, come here, you receive imprisonment. So your brain's going, but he must be the mega Urotsuki Doji overfiend. And I'm just saying, nah, he's just a fella. But I could probably get you there, not today, but inside of maybe like a, took you 2 months, right? Yeah, came in November. So that's November, December. Yeah. You're not 100%. I'm feeding back for the mic. Oh my God. OMG. What was the effect of the process? OMG. It helps. This is what we're calling trauma bonding. So you're in a trauma bonded situation, and we need to break the trauma bond, because right now he seems much higher than he is. Everything I'm going to teach you leads to this point. If you're still trauma bonded to this person, you ain't manipulating nothing, because you can't. You won't be able to think it through, and I'm going to demonstrate this to you in the next 10, 15 minutes. The key principle here, if you're taking notes, I recommend that you write this down. Are you hot? Danny, can you ask the security dude to just ice it down a little bit, please? Thank you. Thanks, babe. You need to see the world through their eyes, not yours. Let me give you a quick overview of that. When we're talking psychopathy particularly, their primary focus is going to be power. Narcissism, it's more to do with building up the self-image, the false self, narcissistic supply. For psychopaths, this is going to be power related. So it's going to be, what can I get? And it will tend to be more at the end of the spectrum, sex, money, something, or vengeance often. Your serial killers are motivated by that kind of thing. It's a fairly simplistic, brutal, Neanderthal worldview, but it's power focused. It's generally focused around power. So when you're asking yourself the question, why is he doing this? Why is she doing this? Look at the world through their eyes and scan the environment for power. What can they do? What can they not do? As Sam just said, you will not be able to opt out of the game if you're in it. Opting out's not an option. Being a good Buddhist, a good, a good Christian or whatever it is not going to help you here. You can't be the spiritual higher power here. You're going to have to play the game the way they do. So seeing the world through their eyes is critical. Could you give me the next slide, please, Howard? Thank you. Step number 4. This is procedural. I can give you stuff that is very, very procedural. As I've just said, it depends on a lot of other factors coming into play first. Apply leverage toward your end goal. Leverage is pleasure or pain. Choose what is going to be most effective for you and apply the leverage towards your end goal. Do it carefully. If they realize you are doing it, you are screwed. You're playing with a master manipulator and you're trying to play them at their own game. So you've got to come in very, very carefully, very subtly. Take your time. Learn their responses. Be soft in your approach. Don't be impatient. Don't rush it. Just take your time. Be open to altering the strategy as you go. Sam was saying before about switching sources of supply. If it's somebody who's at the more narcissistic end of the spectrum, you would offer them cerebral supply, you could offer them somatic supply. You're very clever, you're very bright, you're very successful. My God, I've never seen such determination and bravery and blah, 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 blah. All of that. And watch. This is what they do. They push your buttons and then they wait for your response. This is why you find them staring at you sometimes, like when you're watching TV, like, oh, yes. I've learned this, human. So you do that to them. Push their buttons and you go, oh, do they respond more to a compliment that is this way or more to a compliment that is this way? Is there a sequence? Is there a subject? Learn them. You are a machine. They are a machine. It's systems theory in action. It's not about you and your story and them and their story. Be dispassionate. Take yourself out of it. Think of yourself at a fantasy level, you're a detective. Or probably even better, an intelligence operator working an asset. You're going to have to work the asset because you need them to do something for you and bring you information. You need to know who they are. You need to know when it's time to back off and let them cool. You need to know when it's time to actually push in a little bit more, a little bit of threat, a little bit of reward. This is manipulation. That's in a sentence. I've just described what manipulation is. If you're thinking, ooh, that sounds really grabby and it doesn't come naturally to me, then you're going to have to really slow down because you're going to have to learn as you go when you're doing this to a master manipulator. Be silent in the approach, like ninja. Do not alert them of your intent, or obviously it won't work. They may decide to see where you're going with it whilst plotting your ultimate torturous demise. They may shut you off completely. They may switch sources of supply. They may go for a different target. If they figure out what you're doing, you're going to be in a bad place. So you need to do this very skillfully. The only way you can do it skillfully is if you've resolved your own internal issues first. You've got to heal. You've got to break the trauma bond first. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very dangerous. It's like inviting you to go and box with a blindfold on. You must be willing, if you're playing this psychopathic game, to do or say whatever is necessary to fulfill the end objective. Now, we've already, amongst ourselves in this room, established that you will behave morally, that you will do this for the highest good of all concerned only. You're doing this, because you're protecting your family, you're protecting yourself, a business, whatever. But having chosen to play this game, play it. Play it. There is a trait that they look for, some research look for, called Machiavellianism. This would be the encompassing the principle that the end justifies the means. If you find you're not prepared to do it, don't. Because if you stutter or you do it half-heartedly, you will be in danger. Remember an earlier principle? Keep yourself safe at all times. Keep yourself safe. Next slide, please, sir. Okay. I wrote a book, it did quite well, called How to Take Revenge on a Narcissist. And people were like, how could you possibly recommend taking revenge on a narcissist? And everybody had a huge amount of opinion about the title of the book. They didn't actually read the book. The point of the book, when you read it, was in a way with a sense of humor to introduce people to the idea that, look, if you're obsessed on taking revenge on somebody in this way, it's going to hurt you. And it probably isn't going to work very well. The best thing you can do is heal. And ironically enough, and there is justice in the world, right? And this is how we know there is. When you heal, that is the greatest revenge you could take against somebody who's on the cluster B spectrum. The greatest. I know some of you, your egos right now are going, no, it'd be worse if I did this. No. When you heal, you make the psychopath totally insignificant. Don't put your moral worldview on them. This is the worst thing imaginable. You render them insignificant and impotent and unseen. It's terrifying for them. It's an awful experience for them. And it lets them know that they have failed. They tried to mind control you. They tried to brainwash you, and you walked away. And don't, for the love of all the deities, Zeus included, don't fake it. Do not ever try and fake your healing and be like, oh, I learned, I went to a seminar, I read a book, I went to 3 sessions of counseling. I'm not even like that anymore. They know. You can't trick them. People who are good at this, people like me, we read people scarily well. Very, very, very well. Please, you're too nice. All of you, you're way, way, way too visible. Your intent is visible. Where you're coming from, your emotional states, it's visible. More than you think. I can't read like exactly where everybody's up to, but when you are on the codependency spectrum, you will have been drilled to be sincere. Probably some of the abuse that you experienced would be open your bedroom door, open your drawers, open your diaries, open your phone. Be open, be sincere. Yeah, there's a piece of childhood that fell into place. Clink. And that is why you are driven neurotically now to continue that pattern. It's not nice to be deceptive. A good girl wouldn't tell a lie about a good boy doesn't behave in this way. Well, this is not a course for good girls and boys. This is a course on manipulation. So healing is key, and healing is, if we're talking revenge, the ultimate revenge. That you actually grew and emotionally matured as a person. You know what that means? When you grow and you heal and you emotionally mature and you face your demons and you work through those blind spots, you elevate to a level that they can never, ever reach, and they can never, ever reach to you again. The torture that you put that person through is, it's huge. That's the way to go. That's what you want. When you've done this, by the way, if they come back around for hoovering to re-establish a connection with you, their efforts will be laughable. Their efforts will be laughable. If you're still into that person at some level, all of that will cease, and you'll just go, oh my God. And we hear this in coaching. I can't believe I ever fell for that. We've had clients say that, right? I can't believe. He doesn't even look like I remember him looking. I thought he looked like Johnny Depp. And I'd be like, have you seen fucking pictures of Johnny Depp? Maybe the issue here is for an optometrist or something. But that's the projection, because it's hand in glove, right? Your neurosis is, I want to find a tyrant to bond with. Their neurosis, I want to find a slave to bond with. Ooh, lovely. Hand in glove, no boundaries, super fast relationship establishment. We met the other night. He's living with me now. What? Monday night you met him, and then Wednesday his toothbrush is in your, okay, maybe slow down. But that's how it goes. And that neurotic binding that occurs at that level creates a kind of almost verging on hallucinations, like a psychosis where you can't see reality. He's the most beautiful man. He's like a god. And I'm like, I have bad news for you. And guys, the same way. And the number of times I've heard clients comparing their partner to somebody famous, to a celebrity. What's a celebrity? They're a star. A star. They're higher than me. They're up in the air. They're in another world. Being with them is access to another dimension. And it's the only access to the other dimension. Oh, if I lose them, I don't get to access that dimension anymore. So there are a lot of reasons why we mythologize them. But this is all part of an infantile defense against the truth and previous childhood trauma. If you still just want revenge, then my advice would be to keep working on healing until the impulse abates, because that will be your revenge, ironically enough. This is how we know there is justice there. If you heal, that is the greatest vengeance. It's said elsewhere, the greatest revenge is living well. For codependents, living well is impossible until there is healing. We can't. We don't know how to. That's a seminar for another day. But Pete Walker's book, From Surviving to Thriving, when you're caught in CPTSD, there's no thriving. None of us thrive. We don't even know how to, probably because it's a taboo. You're not allowed to live your best life. That seminar we'll do another day, because some of you just went, Okay, we'll do that seminar another day. But thriving and moving forward and living well is impossible for people who are caught in the grip of CPTSD. Next slide, please, Howard. Thank you. Okay, so an example. I have, you say about the money situation. I have a histrionic, borderline, ex who owes me money. How am I going to leverage money back from them? So you would ask the questions. What is their worldview? What is their self-image? What's the false self consist of? Presumably I have all this data because I've been living with this girl. I've known this girl for a while. What do they want most? Those of you who have somebody in your life who you're specifically thinking of, have you ever thought to list what they want most? You should. Have you ever thought to think about what their self-image is? You define their self-image because they've done that for you. They have that weapon available against you. So consider, what is their self-image? What is their ultimate fantasy self? Are they trying to be an archetype? Are they trying to be a character from a movie, as Sam said? This is the correct way to think in practical terms, in daily terms, about how to actually deal with a narcissist or psychopath. They are a character in a movie in which they direct, they write the script, they're the executive producer. What is their character and what is the movie? Figure it out. You must, for this to work. You must figure out what movie they're in. Obviously, you're making it up. There isn't really a movie. But if there was a movie, for my ex, she told me it was The Little Mermaid. It was The Little Mermaid. She was obsessed with it. So she believed she was an otherworldly creature that could talk to animals, and she had no place on land because she didn't like, like that was the false self, the false image. So everything came back to, it sounds silly, it sounds infantile, but we all live stories. We're all living an idea of what we would most like to be. Once I figured it out, all of the behavior, I was like, oh, Christ, okay. She wants to be down there with the fishes. Fine. I'll help her. No, joking. What assets or strengths do I have? As a codependent for me in relationships, it was very, very hard for me to establish what weaponry was available to me in this war because I didn't want to be at war. I was like, please, please, please don't make me fight. Please, please, please don't put me at war, until I realized, like, it's a fight for survival. I was getting physically sick. I was getting mentally sick. I was getting financially very, very sick. So I had to start doing this. I was forced to. It was gone to the head moment. What assets or strengths do you have? You would do well, ladies and gentlemen, to actually figure this out for yourself as well and to write it down. It's a good exercise for you because some of you are suffering with self-esteem that is a little, shall we say, ropey around the edges. So to actually sit down and say, what am I good at? What am I proud of? What are my skill sets? What are my strengths? It's like it's a counseling technique, isn't it? You'll do that sometimes in counseling to help people out. But you guys need to do this more for the terms of this course because you're making an assessment of your strengths and your weapons in this particular war. Because you haven't done it, it will give you a misperception of where you're up to. You need to know what vulnerabilities. When they attack, where are they going to strike first? And they get it wrong, by the way. I've had tons of experience of people getting it completely wrong. I'll give you graphic examples, but people who've come to attack me and they go, I'm going to say this to you, I'm going to say this to you. I keep getting people saying things to me. They keep attacking me physically. When I'm like, that's cerebrally, if you want to attack me. Turn the cameras off. Cerebrally. I'm like, physically, I've had people say, you're really fat. You're really that. I've had ex-girlfriends say that to me, and I'm like, I don't give a shit. Think of something that does hurt. Why did she do that, by the way? Because she had an eating disorder. What was she doing? She was projecting. She felt, what would hurt me the most? And she went, what would hurt me the most? Aha, I'll do that. You see this when couples argue, and they start to fling rocks at each other. Sometimes they get it wrong. So the first rock that they go for, they're projecting onto you their insecurities. They're going, aha, I'll say this because this would hurt me. So sometimes when you're arguing, the person's actually telling you, they're mapping for you what their vulnerabilities and insecurities are. Can you do this in a way that they don't realize you've done anything? The slickest way would be for them to never know that this has happened. I would be happiest if you tried to do it via positive means, bribery, rewarding. I think that's going to have the best outcome for you, and that they never realize you've done it. But the whole manipulation operation, this whole intelligence operation, from start to finish, They gave you what you were looking for, and they thought it was their idea. I just want to give you guys more money. Oh, muito obrigado. We'll take that. You know, if you can do it like that, I would consider that maximum success. That would be the maximum success, that they thought that they had come to that conclusion themselves. So you'd ask yourself questions. Can I use flattery or reward? Can I use fear of consequence? What's going to get you to where you want to go as smoothly as possible? So we're doing it quietly, we're doing it smoothly, and we want them to feel like the whole thing was their idea from start to finish. Remember your intent. If it's just to get revenge, this will not go well for you. I'm going to hand back over to Sam.
I'm going to pull a Richard on you. Well, no? No? That's the last thing I'm going to take off. The last thing I'm going to take off. Because if I take the rest off, no one will ever come to a seminar with me again. Then Richard would feel very bad about. I'm sorry, it's extremely hot here. Some of the audience is hot, temperature is hot, it's too hot. I would like to relate to some of the questions. Is this the end of a seminar? Dialogue? No, I mean we have more.
Oh, yeah.
Like seminar is until when? 4?
The seminar part is until 4, so
Until
we'll,
4, so
we'll
we
give
have time.
them
Okay,
a
so
half-hour break
I want
in
to,
20 minutes.
thanks.
Yeah.
I wanted to. So I'd like to talk to. I'd like to talk about one or two of the questions that you've raised. So first of all, I used to be economic advisor to governments and management consultant in the various firms, and some of you may know that one of the main analytic techniques we use is called SWOT analysis. SWOT. SWOT is SWOT. That's strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And I think SWOT analysis is perfectly applicable to relationships. What are the strengths of the relationship, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? And also to each member of the relationship. What are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for this partner and for this? You will learn. I mean, if you apply to yourself to SWOT, and just Google SWOT. I don't want to give now. Don't want to switch to a seminar about management techniques. But I strongly recommend, strongly advise, to go online to have a look at SWOT analysis. You will see how immediately applicable it is to your marriages, to your relationships, to your. It's a very, very powerful technique. Second thing, I'd like to deal with the asshole versus narcissist versus psychopath versus some Vaknin issue. So I think one of the reasons most, I don't know what word to use, victims, survivors, whatever, empaths, which is the new nonsensical word, whatever turns you on. The people who had been with narcissists are still with narcissists, will probably be narcissists again. I think one of the reasons you feel that you're narcissist, because you have there's this thing, my narcissist. The reason you feel you're narcissist is a demon, has demonic qualities, or that it's part of a good versus evil struggle in Nicaean terms, God versus Satan, etc., or the wave of narcissism that somehow you are bucking the trend in your own little corner, or whatever else narrative you may have adopted. I think it has an aggrandizing function, actually. I think it makes some of you feel very special, very unique. In other words, I think it's a form of narcissistic defense. If my narcissist is super evil, that makes me super special, to have survived, to have coped, to have learned how to manipulate him, to have prevailed over him, etc., etc. The more special your narcissist is, well, by implication, the more special you are. So there's an angle of narcissism here, actually, an angle of uniqueness. Now, consequently, many of you, when I say many of you, it means many, many, many of you, develop what I call personal conspiracy theories. A favorite personal conspiracy theory is my narcissist has nothing better to do in life than to destroy me. I am the focus of his existence I am the essence of his aspirations. I am the reification of his life, etc., etc. Leave alone the narcissism embedded in such claims. Forget that for a minute. And there are people who are sadistic. There are people who are malevolent. There are people who are evil. There are no people whose sole purpose is to destroy one single individual. None. Not one. There are people whose purpose is to destroy collectives. Adolf Hitler was such a person. But even Adolf Hitler had dogs. So, this is an example of what I call personal conspiracy theory. And there are many other such personal conspiracy theories. If you look deep into your souls, those of you who have them, you will see that you are actually embedded in a personal conspiracy, most of you, not all, embedded in a personal conspiracy theory. Now, the conspiracy theories, we just made a segment yesterday, it will be released post-mortem in my case. So, conspiracy theories have a series of functions. I will not go into all this because this day we made a 2-hour segment. And it will be available online, I understand from Richard, so I'm not going into all this, but I will focus on 2-3 elements. And personal conspiracy theories are conspiracy theories, exactly like JFK's assassination on 9/11, you know, with the narcissist in the role of the second shooter. So personal conspiracy theory has several functions. Everything we do in life, from the psychological point of view, fulfills a need. Psychology, the entire science of psychology, is based on needs and their gratification. Not some Vaknin, Sigmund Freud, the pleasure principle, and so on and so forth. So, what are the needs? We need to identify the needs. Well, the first need, I think, is what Richard had identified, stolen my thunder. That's why I took off my sweater. So, the first need is absolution. You need absolution. Why you need absolution? Because if you are absolved, you are no longer responsible. If you had no contribution to your condition, if you were just the play toys of the playthings of forces of nature, if you are just magnets, if you are just passive recipients of the narcissist's wrath, malice, etc., etc., then of course you're not responsible by definition. And not being responsible, you can be absolved. If, however, the situation you are in, you had to do something with it. I mean, you had to do something with the situation you're in. If you had contributed to it, fostered it, engendered it, created it in many cases, made choices, definitely intimate partner choices, and made also a choice to stay, mind you, choices to stay, choices to perpetuate, etc., etc. If you're responsible in any way, shape, or form, that is ego dystonic. That is uncomfortable. It creates what we call dissonance. So the dissonance could be cognitive or other. There are many types of dissonance, but generally it creates ego dystony. Ego dystony means you don't feel good with yourself. You don't feel comfortable with yourself. And ego dystony is intolerable, even more intolerable than some Vaknin. You need to get rid of it. So the only way to get rid of it is to reframe it. Reframe it by creating a counter-narrative. So in the case of cognitive dissonance, we can create a narrative that we actually didn't want something. We want something, we cannot get it. So we say we actually don't want it. That's a counter-narrative that settles cognitive dissonance. So this creates dissonance, and the narrative is, it's not my fault. I had nothing, or I had little to do with it. I fell prey. He's a predator, I fell prey. He's like a virus, like a tiger, you know? It's not my fault. That's the narrative. The second, I think, function of a personal conspiracy theory is to imbue your situation with meaning. Give it some meaning. Give it some significance. Embed it in some context. Because is meaninglessness. Hence, sheer nonsense like God and religion. They imbue people with meaning. They give them meaning. They give them significance. I'm not saying that God and religion are not powerful forces. They're very powerful forces, precisely because of this. Because we need narratives that create meaning. But the narrative can be true or false, nonsensical or rational, whatever. But we still need narratives to create meaning. Now, the personal conspiracy theory creates meaning, of course. Your life suddenly becomes meaningful, significant. my abuser, me. There's a beautiful diagram, some of them provided by Richard. Everything is, everything falls into place. Everything falls into place. Not only that, but you're part of a global movement. You belong. Satisfies a sense of belonging. You're not alone. There are forums with hundreds of thousands of people like you. It's a universal experience, akin, similar, a little, to a mystical experience. So you find kindred spirits. You share, you care. Sharing is caring. The third function of a personal conspiracy theory is an external locus of control. You externalize your locus of control. If your locus of control is internal, you must take steps. That's the implication. Since you're loath to take steps, most of you, most of the time, are loath to take steps, then one way is to externalize the locus of control. There's nothing I can do. I mean, he's such an out-of-this-world supernatural entity, there's nothing much I can do. And I think the last reason we have personal conspiracy theories is paranoia. Now, a general comment about paranoia. Paranoia is a form of narcissism. Think about the following. I'm hunted by the CIA. That's in some people's case. It's a form of paranoia. But when you say I'm hunted by the CIA, there's another sentence that goes unsaid. I am sufficiently important to be hunted by the CIA. That's a sentence that goes unsaid. If my abuser focuses on my destruction and only on my destruction, I am sufficiently important to warrant the resources, attention, time of this person. Makes me, in a way, unique or important. I matter. So paranoia is a form of narcissism. Make no mistake about it. And anyone who is paranoid, even mildly, most of us are, whenever this paranoia rears its ugly head, its twin, narcissism, comes with it. It's never divorced. So these are the general comments I wanted to make about personal conspiracy theories, which would make me even less popular than half an hour ago, which is, I thought, was impossible, but still. Today what I would like to, I will start, but I don't think I'll be able to finish because it's 20 minutes only. So my next segment, I will finish. So actually, you know what? Because we have like 10 minutes, I will not start this segment. It's about workplace. So let's wait and let's use this 10 minutes for questions. No.
How important is humility in healing from this? That's my question.
In dealing with?
In healing from narcissistic abuse, how important is it to be humble?
To be humble. Well, to start with, had I been humble, I would have been perfect. So I wouldn't know much about it. I don't think it's so much about humility, but about a sense of perspective, proportionality. It's much more important than humility. One need not be humble if one has grounds to be proud of oneself, one's accomplishments, etc., etc. Actually, a healthy sense of self-worth, which is comprised of self-esteem, self-confidence, self-image. A healthy sense of self-worth crucially depends on a modicum of lack of humility. Humility is one of my least favorite traits because I think it can easily become narcissism. False modesty is characteristic of many narcissists. Narcissists use religion, morality, modesty to aggrandize themselves, actually. I mean, look how humble I am. Look how humble I am. Don't I deserve praise? So I don't think it's a good idea, but I think proportionality is. And I think people, victims of abuse, people who've been subjected to narcissistic abuse, tend to lose perspective and proportion, tend to blow things out of proportion. Perspective because they regard the personal trauma as very personal, like idiosyncratic. Only I had this trauma. Yes, everyone had similar traumas, but this trauma only I had. So they feel solipsistic. They feel isolated. They feel like no one will understand them. Actually, even fellow sufferers will not understand them. It's so. And the second thing I think why they blow things out of proportion is and so on is because abuse tends to make you feel helpless, impotent, humiliated, and so on and so forth. It's a method of re-establishing a sense of self-worth and regaining a modicum of control. So they blow things out of proportion, and that restores somehow their inner balance or inner equilibrium. But that is extremely unhealthy. If I had to say what is the thing that hampers healing most, it's actually not the abuse, but the fact that people insist on a personal narrative that has very little to do with reality, and that correspond to a form of a private religion or private myth that they then get invested in, addicted to, and defend ferociously against any incursion by a therapist, I mean, if you tell a victim, well, maybe you did something. No, I'm a victim. He was a horrible man. I mean, they become aggressive, in effect. I think that's the reason why on victims' forums there is an inordinate amount of aggression. Inordinate. I mean, I have never seen any group of people with more aggression than victims' forums, because everyone there is extremely protective and defensive of a personal narrative, a mythologizing personal narrative, because they need desperately to restore a sense to delete learned helplessness, to get rid of learned helplessness, and to restore a sense of self-worth. It's a critical function. But it hampers healing very, very badly.
Please elaborate a little bit on silent treatment versus going no contact. I think most people they think they're going no contact, but silent treatment, what's the difference? The end result is being quiet, right?
Yeah, so it's death. So the fact that something is common to several phenomena doesn't mean they're the same. No contact is a strategy that I invented in 1995, and it simply means no contact of any kind, not only silence, any kind of contact. Not receiving gifts, not sharing information, even indirectly, via friends, nothing. Communicating only via intermediaries, like attorneys and accountants. I mean, no contact is absolute no contact. For silent treatment to be effective, you need to be present. So silent treatment is actually the opposite of no contact. Because if you go silent treatment like this lady's husband, it's not very meaningful. For silent treatment to have its impact, the person who engages in silent treatment must be somehow present in your life, the other end of a phone line, in your home, demonstrating to you. He refuses to talk, refuses to communicate. So silent treatment requires presence, no contact requires utter absence. You know, exactly opposite poles. Silent treatment is a passive-aggressive technique, commonly deployed even in the workplace, where difficult employees or bosses or engage in, I'm not talking to you. So silent treatment is very common, and it involves not so much a lack of communication, but communicating a lack of communication. Actually, communication form. It's not that you don't communicate. For example, I'm not talking to Richard right now, but Richard would never imagine that it's silent treatment. But if I am not communicating to him in a demonstrable, ostentatious way, that would be silent treatment because I communicated to him, I don't want to talk to you. So that would include extreme elements of body language, for example. Like, you know, avoiding. So silent treatment is a whole panoply of non-verbal and verbal cues. Communication strategies I am not. While no contact is simply absolutely avoiding the other person in any way, shape, or form imaginable. Definitely not communicating to them. I'm not communicating to you.
burn the calories. Wait into the mic, please.
It's just a general question. Is the idealization stage completely false? Are you purposely setting us up for failure? Do you have no capacity to love or attach to people? Or is it just that you get bored, disillusioned, or, when you're challenged? Is there any way to avoid the devaluation and discard ultimately?
Let me guess, you don't like narcissists.
No.
Is there any way you assholes can... Idealization is an internal process, never an external process. It's simply the narcissist taking figments of his psychology and putting them loosely together and then hanging them up on someone. So all idealization is actually an inner construct. That's a common mistake of many people. They think, well, the narcissist has seen me, then he has exaggerated my traits, or he... No. Narcissist uses you as an excuse to create, again, a story, a narrative, a protagonist, a hero, and then hang it. You're a hanger. The best metaphor is that you're a hanger. A hanger in a cupboard. And the narcissist hangs, his sweatshirt or whatever on you. But it's utterly inner construct. And that's precisely why it's so easy to flip. That's why, because it's not external. It doesn't depend on you at all. Of course, the idealization has to have something to do with you, but only in the most rudimentary sense. So, for example, I am not likely to idealize you as a basketball player for some reason. But maybe I'm likely to idealize you as a homemaker. So loosely, I will construct the idea, but it's first me. I need to find the homemaker. Now, who is, okay, you. I mean, it's not like I see you, then I say, well, you're a homemaker. I first need a homemaker, then I find a candidate. Any candidate, doesn't matter. If she has 2 legs and still walks, she can be a homemaker. So I will hang it on her. The process of devaluation has to do only with one thing. Again, against all the nonsense online. That devaluation is a malicious plot to destroy you. Devaluation has to do only with one single thing. Do you or don't you provide high quality supply? Period. As long as you provide high quality supplies, we discussed before, you will continue to be idealized. The minute you stop providing the supply, you'll be devalued. It's extremely simple. Then I'll dump you and find someone else. That's also simple. The process of devaluation is very swift because it's very easy to tell whether you're providing supply or not providing supply. Now, that's a question. Depending who you are you to me. If you're a colleague, for example, you would need to provide me with primary supply. Primary supply means adulation, admiration, affirmation, or fearing me. Being feared is also supply. So negative or positive, but you need to provide me with primary supply. That's my, with primary supply. But if you're my wife, you would need to provide me with secondary supply. Secondary supply is seriously different to primary supply. What my wife needs to do, she needs to record all my moments of glory. And when the supply is low, release them to me. So in other words, she needs to regulate the flow of supply. She needs to open and close the spigot of supply based on an external memory. So she is my external memory and a regulator of supply via release of the external memory. Of course, it would help if she would do this, if she does this in an adulating, fawning, admiring way, right? But her main function is this. All other people, their function is primary supply. So as long as you are with me, as a wife, and you witness all my moments of glory, and you store them in memory, in faithful detail, because I'm going to test you, faithful detail, and then release it when I'm low, when I don't have supply, and so on, you will continue to be idealized. If you're my colleague, I would expect you to constantly tell me how great I am and what a genius I am, amazing, and so on and so forth. That's a totally different type of narcissistic supply. Again, you will continue to be idealized, but the interaction has nothing to do with Narcissists do not interact with external objects, period. For example, I can meet a woman, let's say. Okay, so she's external. Well, some women are. And then I create an image, I internalize it. I create a representation, an avatar, if you wish. I internalize it. From that second, I continue to interact with the internal representation, not with the woman. And then I leave, and I meet her 10 years later. And I would try to continue the interaction from the moment it stopped, having interacted only with the internal object. And if she had changed in these 10 years, I would react with shock, indignation, rage, a panoply of negative emotions, because there would then be a massive discrepancy between the internal and the external object. Now, if I have an internal object of you, and we're married, and you begin to develop autonomy, you go to study, you find a job, you make your own money, you suddenly become a successful entrepreneur, or you have children and you pay attention to them, a gap starts to open between the frozen, mummified internal representation and you. So you're suddenly acquiring your own existence separate from the internal object. If the gap becomes big enough, I will devalue you. You will be of no use to me anymore. So the narcissist partner must remain within very strict, extremely narrow boundaries, and we call this process constriction. Extremely narrow boundaries, so that she never deviates too much from the initial internal object. She never has autonomy, never has independence, never disagrees and criticizes because it means she has an opinion, it means she has a separate mind. I mean, she is within, I can't describe how, in essence, she should suspend her existence. She should die. She should die and become mummified. And that reminds me, of course, of Alfred Hitchcock's film, Psycho, where there's this guy, he's running a Bates Motel. He's running a motel and so on. In the upper floor, his mother, there's his mother, and she died. And he mummified her. And every morning he puts her on a chair facing the world outside. And every evening he comes up, takes her from she's mummified, she's embalmed. Takes her from the chair, puts her in bed, kisses her, good night, mommy, and so on. That's the narcissist partner. My ideal partner is a mummified body in a chair. Unlikely to answer back, unlikely to argue, to disagree, to criticize, unlikely to develop her own life, unlikely to cause me abandonment anxiety by looking at other men. I mean, and then all she has to do is record my life and play it back to me when I need it. As simple as that. That kind of partner I would never get rid of. She's totally idealized for the rest of her natural death. And this was the romantic rendition of there was a romantic version.
Poetic, flowery.
The poetic, romantic, flowery, touchy-feely version. I can't imagine the reality.
We should probably show them some mercy.
There's no mercy, I'm narcissist.
Guys, can you please be back in the room for 25 past? Thank you very much.